Hi guys, welcome to the new lesson. Today we're going to learn about the object marking particle, and before we dive into what that is and how we use it, I think it's important to clarify what exactly an object is in a sentence. So, in one of our previous lessons, we learned that the Korean sentence structure goes like this. Subject comes first, and then object, and then verb, which is slightly different from English in that the object comes before a verb, not after, like English, right? For example, in English, you would say, I like you, right? And in this sentence, I, the doer of the action, is the subject, and like is verb, and you is the target of the action, so thereby an object. So here, some of you might be wondering, hey, you is a person, it's not an object. Isn't object a word that is used to refer to a non-living thing? When we're talking about object, grammatically, in a grammatical sense, like object in a sentence, not object per se, it refers to the target on which a verb or the action is done, a target that is directly affected by the verb. So let's take a look at the example sentences that I brought and practice identifying the object in each sentence. So let's look at this sentence. I do homework in the evening. So obviously I am the doer, so I is the subject. Do would be the action, and homework is something that is being done, right? That is directly, the target that is directly affected by do. So the homework is something that is being done, right? So this is the target word. This is the object. And how about I already ate dinner? I, obviously, it's a subject. Ate is the action, is the verb. And dinner is something that is eaten by the subject, right? So this is the target of the verb, the target onto which a verb is done. So dinner is the object here. And in this sentence, I like you. You is the person that is directly affected by the verb like, right? You is the person that is being liked by the subject, I. So you is the object here. And Jisoo doesn't like me in this sentence as well. Me is the person who is being liked. The verb like is directly done onto, right? So me is the object here. So those are what an object is in a sentence. And just like we mark the subject with the subject marking particle, right? 은는 and 이가, like we learned in the last lesson last time, we can also do the same with the object marking particle. And object marking particle consists of 을 or 를 to mark the object in a sentence. And by now, I'm sure you guys can guess that 을 is placed after a noun that does end in final consonant, and 를 is placed after a noun that does not end in final consonant, that ends in a vowel, right? So let's practice using these object marking particles in the sentences that I brought. Now we already identified the object in this sentence, so I think we can easily do it here. So I'm going to translate each sentence in Korean, but since we're only going to focus on the objects in a sentence, please don't worry if you don't understand like certain words that are translated in the sentence. So I do homework. So this is an adverb, guys. This is an adverb that marks the time, right? So for now, we can just disregard it. And I do homework. You put subject first, 저, and then you mark it with subject marker. And then you put the object, not the verb first. You have to put the object first. So homework is 숙제. To mark it with an object marking particle, we would use 를, right? Because 숙제 does not end in 받침, right? So 숙제를. And then the rest of the sentence, 해요, I do homework. If you want to put in the evening, we can put it somewhere in the beginning of the sentence, like here. So you can say 저는 저녁에 in the evening 숙제를 해요. How about I already ate dinner? So this is an adverb. So let's first disregard it. So I obviously is the subject. Or you can also remove it if it's obvious by context that it is I who ate dinner. 저는, and then you can put the object first. 저녁 is dinner, and since 저녁 ends in 받침, you can mark the object with 을, right? Actually, let's highlight the object in each sentence so that you guys won't get confused. The highlighted words are the object. So 저녁을 먹었어요. I ate. And already is an adverb, so we can place it somewhere in the beginning of the sentence. 저는 이미 저녁을 먹었어요. How about I like you? So for this one, we're gonna use 반말. So 나는, right? Subject. And then you can put you, object, and then you mark it with 를, right? Because it's an object in a sentence. 너를 좋아해. 나는 너를 좋아해. How about 지수 doesn't like me? 지수는, and then object is I, me, right? So 나, and then you mark it with object marker. 나를 doesn't like. 안 좋아해. So you can mark the object like this. This is very easy, right? This is very simple. If you identify what is an object in a sentence, marking the object with object marking particle is a piece of cake, right? So I know that word. How about I know that word? Let's switch to 존댓말. 저는, and that word is an object, so that word is 그 단어. And then we mark it with 를. And then the verb comes. 알아요. How about Mom didn't watch that movie yet. Mom didn't watch that movie. This is an adverb. So 엄마가 or 엄마는 subject. 엄마는 object comes first, right? 그 영화, and then we mark it with 를. 안 봤어요, didn't watch. 안 봤어요. And yet is an adverb, so we can place it somewhere at the front part of the sentence. So 엄마는 아직, or actually for this one it sounds more natural to be placed right before a verb. So you can say 아직. We're gonna learn more about adverbs in the later lessons. So now that we learned how to identify an object in a sentence and how to use object marking particles, let's do a quick quiz and check if each of these sentences require an object particle or not. So let's first look at the sentence. I am a student. So here you can see that to be verb is used, and this sentence simply states that I, the subject in a sentence, equals a student, right? And there is no action that affects the noun student. So this is not a verb that requires an object, a target on which the verb or action is done to, because this verb is simply used to state that subject equals noun. So this sentence does not have an object, so automatically object particle isn't needed here. And actually guys, this is the sentence where noun plus ida verb has to be used. And we're going to learn more in depth about ida verb in the next lesson. How about I am smart? This one, I is the subject. And can you spot any object here? Nope. there is only a descriptive verb. I am smart. We learned that this is called an adjective, right? So this is a place for adjective, and adjective does not require an object because it doesn't make sense if an adjective have an object, because adjective is used to describe how the subject is like, right? So this sentence does not require an object nor object marking particle. How about I can read? The sentence, I can read. So clearly, I is the subject, and can read is a verb, right? And read, 읽다, is definitely a verb that can have an object, right? Something can be read, right? So read can definitely have a target word, but in this sentence, there is no object. It can have an object, but in this particular sentence, there is no object. It just says, I can read. It just describes your ability to read. So this sentence does not have an object in the sentence, so object particle is not needed. How about I can read 한글? There you go. So subject, verb, and reading what? It's specified what you can read, right? The target you read. So there is an object, and thereby you can use the object marking particle. Actually, let's translate the sentence and try using the object marking particle in a sentence. So 저는 한글 is an object in this sentence, right? 한글, and then you mark it with object marker 을, since 한글 ends in 받침. 한글을 you can say 읽을 수 있어요. 저는 한글을 읽을 수 있어요. I can read 한글. How about my hair is brown? So my hair is the subject, right? And is brown is an adjective. Or actually, if translated in Korean, we say is brown color. So it has to be used with 이다, noun plus 이다 verb, but we're gonna get to it later. But either way, you cannot use object in the sentence. There is no object in this sentence, right? So this sentence does not require an object marker. How about the hairdresser cut my hair? The hairdresser is the person who cuts, so she is the subject, and cut is verb. And my hair is something that is directly affected by cut, right? That is being cut, that the action cut is done on to. So my hair is the object. So the hairdresser cut my hair. Let's try translating this one. 미용사는 or 미용사가 my hair, 제 머리 means my hair, and since this is an object, you can mark it with 를. So subject marking particle, object marking particle, and then cut. 잘랐어요. 잘랐어요. You can use it like this. So that's all the basic you need to know about the object marking particle. And now we're going to move on to a more confusing grammar, more advanced grammar. Actually, I just changed the section title from confusing verbs to verbs to note when using object particles. So these are the verbs that need extra attention, but I wouldn't say it's like confusing. So I didn't want to create any like bias even before getting into it, that this is so confusing and so difficult, because it's not. It's a grammar point that actually makes a lot of sense. So please don't worry, and you can just follow me. So I classified the verbs that need extra attention into 3 groups. The first one is 수여동사, bestowal verb. And the second group of verbs are the verbs that seem like you have to use object marker, but actually 이가, the subject marker, is used. And the third group are passive verbs. So we're going to go over them one by one. And let's start with the first group of verbs, bestowal verb, 수여동사. So as you can see from its name, basically it's a verb that implies that you are bestowing something to another person. Such verbs also exist in English, most common one being to give. So when you're using to give verb in a sentence, it goes sort of like this. I gave mom a present. So in English grammar, gave, to give verb, can have two objects, mom and a present. And in Korea, when we're learning English, we name each of these objects an indirect object and a direct object. So a present is something that is given, that is directly affected by give, right? So present is something that is given, so it's a direct object. By me giving a present to mom, mom becomes the receiver, so we call this an indirect object. So mom is something that's not directly given, right? Mom is the receiver of the verb give. So these indirect object, direct object terms are not really important, guys. But I wanted to mention this because I wanted to compare Korean grammar and English grammar so that you can understand better. So in Korean grammar, we do not classify someone who has bestowed something an object. Only a present, the direct object, becomes an object. So that means we only mark the object, the direct object, with object marking particle, and someone that is bestowed something to, we don't mark it with an object marking particle, we use something else. And same applies to all these verbs. 주다, 보내다, 가르치다, 말하다, 말해주다, 보여주다, 사주다, 가져다, 주다. And let's learn more in depth using the example sentences. So let's try this sentence first. I gave my friend a gift. Like I just mentioned, this is the direct object, and this is someone who is given something to, who is bestowed something to, right? So we wouldn't mark my friend with object marker, just a gift. So let's try translating this sentence. I gave, 저는 subject. So you can put the object first. 선물 means gift. And you can mark it with object marker since this is a direct object that is given, right? And my friend is 제 친구. And we learned that another particle has to be used other than object marker, right? And that particle is either 에게 or 한테. 에게, 한테, they mean the same thing and they mean to a person. So these are the particles that are only attached after a person noun to mean to a person. It can sometimes mean from a person as well, and I actually have a separate video on these two particles, 에게 and 한테, and you can check it somewhere above here. And back to the sentence, 저는 선물을 제 친구한테, and then finally you can write the verb. 줬어요. 줬어요. So you can mark the receiver of something with 에게 and 한테, which is the equivalent of to. So basically, it means I gave to my friend a gift. We don't consider a receiver object of a verb. How about I didn't tell mom my secret? So to tell also has two objects, right? Mom, who is being told to, and my secret, which is the thing that is being told. So my secret is the direct object, something that is directly affected by telling. And mom is someone who hears it, so she is the receiver, receiving end. So I didn't tell my mom my secret will be translated to 저는. So my secret is 제 비밀. You can mark it with the object marker, 제 비밀을. And 엄마, mom, who is at the receiving end, the hearing end, you can mark it with 한테 or 에게, right? 엄마한테 or 엄마에게 말했어요. 제 비밀을, 안 말했어요 because I didn't tell. If you haven't learned about the verbs yet, you can just disregard it for now because we're only focusing on the object markers and the related grammar. How about I teach people Korean? This one as well. People is at the receiving end. Korean is something that is being taught, something that is directly affected by the verb. So, I teach, 저는, and you can say 한국어, Korean. Since Korean is the object, the direct object of the verb, you can mark it with an object marking particle. And people, 사람들 are the ones that are receiving my service of teaching. So you can mark it with 한테 or 에게, 사람들한테 한국어를 I teach, 가르쳐요. How about bought? So to buy in Korean is 사다. And when we use buy as a bestowal verb, that means to buy someone something, it has a different form, which is 사주다. 주다 is an auxiliary verb that can be attached after a present conjugated verb. And this is the grammar that you're gonna learn as you advance further. But anyways, in this sentence, it's bought someone something, so we have to use this bestowal verb, right? Not 사다, 사주다. So my dad, 아빠가, and gift is something that is being bought, right? So this is the direct object, so you can mark gift, 선물 with 을, and then me is 저, and I am the person who is at the receiving end, so you can say 저한테 사줬어요. 아빠가 선물을 저한테 사줬어요. Or actually guys, you can also put 저한테, the receiver, in front of the direct object. So you can also say 아빠가 저한테 선물을 사줬어요. 아빠가 저한테 선물을 사줬어요. How about this one, guys? This one. Bring is also another bestowal verb, and you can use 가져다 주다. And I think if you guys got the hang of it, you guys can guess that you mark me, the receiver, with 한테 or 에게, and some water with the object marking particle, right? So with that in mind, let's try translating this sentence. Can you bring me some water? You can say 저한테 물 means water, 물, and then you can mark it with object marking particle. 저한테 물을 좀 가져다 주시겠어요? So this 좀 means a little, but it's also used in request like this to make it a little more softer. 저한테 물을 좀 가져다 주시겠어요? Or you can also remove 저한테 if it's obvious by context. You are asking someone to bring me some water. So 저한테 물을 좀 가져다 주시겠어요? How about I sent my boss an email an hour ago. For this one as well, this one is the direct object. Email is the direct object, so you can mark it with object marker. Boss is somebody who is receiving what's being sent, right? So my boss can be marked with 에게 or 한테. So with this in mind, let's also translate the sentence. I sent my boss an email an hour ago. So an hour ago is an adverb, right? So maybe we can write this first. 1시간 전에. Let's remove the subject, assuming that it's already obvious by context that I is the subject. 1시간 전에. My boss is 사장님. And then you can say 한테 or 에게, 사장님한테. And email should be the direct object, so you can mark it with 을. 사장님한테 이메일을 보냈어요. I sent an email an hour ago. You can write it like this. Or you can also replace 한테 with 게, which is an honorific form of 에게 or 한테, and this one is also covered in 에게, 한테 lesson that I will link in the description box, like I mentioned earlier. But the important thing to note is that you cannot mark 사장님 with 을 here, right? He is the receiver of the direct object that's being done. He's at the receiving end of the service, so he has to be marked with 한테. Let's try two more. So I wrote mom a letter every day. 저는 every day, 매일. And mom has to be marked with 한테. Letter has to be marked with 을, right? 저는 매일 엄마한테. A letter is 편지를 썼어요. For this sentence as well, you mark 지수, the receiver, with 한테, to 지수, and drawing, something that's directly shown, right, with object marker. So, 저는 I didn't show my drawing. So let's put 지수 first. 지수, 한테, to 지수. 제 drawing is 그림. 지수한테 제 그림 should be marked with 을. 그림을 I didn't show. 안 보여줬어요. You can say like this. Okay, so we covered all the 7 verbs that I wrote here. These are the verbs that require the receiver and a direct object that is being directly done, right? And for the receiver, you mark them with 에게 or 한테, literally meaning to, right? To that person. And for direct object, you can mark them with 을, because it's something that is directly done to those people. Before we move on to the second group, there are more verbs that I brought. The first one is 전화하다, which means to call, as in to make a phone call. When you're calling someone, that someone is the receiver of the phone call, right? So in this case as well, that someone has to be marked with 한테 or 에게 as well. So for example, if you want to say, I will call my mom soon. I will call my mom soon. You can say 엄마한테. Let's remove 저는, I, assuming that it's obvious by context that I am calling. 엄마한테 전화할 거예요 would be the correct translation of I will call my mom soon, or 곧, as in like soon, the adverb soon. So as you can see, 엄마, the receiver of the phone call, is marked with 한테 because you're calling to mom, right? You're calling to mom. So you cannot say 엄마를 전화할 거예요, because 엄마를 전화할 거예요 would mean basically you're treating mom as a phone call, and that would be very weird, and that's completely different from what you would mean, right? So 엄마한테 전화할 거예요 would be the correct way to say it. The next one, when you mean to call someone, as in to call someone a certain name, to call someone with a certain name, we use 부르다 verb. And since this someone is a person who is directly called, we mark it with 을. And for the name, we have a different grammar point, a more advanced grammar point that you will learn as you study on, called 이라고. So for example, if you want to say, my family calls me a cutie pie, if you want to translate this, you would mark me with 을, someone that is called, is directly called. So I am an object in the sentence. I'm the object of the verb call. And a cutie pie wouldn't be considered an object because literally when you say my family calls me a cutie pie, it means my family calls me with the name a cutie pie, right? So cutie pie is not considered an object of call. Rather, me is the someone that's being called, so me would be considered an object in this sentence. So to translate this, you can say 저희 가족은, my family, 저희 가족은 저희 is marked with 를, cutie pie would be 귀염둥이라고 불러요. So this would be the most natural translation of my family calls me a cutie pie. So this 라고 grammar, guys, you don't have to worry about it now because we will study this grammar when we get to a more advanced level in beginner grammar. So we're gonna get there, so don't worry about it now. But you can just remember that when you say you're calling someone by a name, we always mark that someone with an object marking particle. And also, when we mean to summon as in like to tell someone to come here, right? We also mark that someone being summoned with an object marking particle because someone is being directly summoned by a subject, right? So someone is also marked with 을. So if you want to say, maybe like tell Jisoo to come here this instant. If you are to translate this sentence, you can say it. So tell Jisoo to come here. For this one, 부르다 verb can be used. So you can say this instance 당장, 지금 당장 지수, and then you can mark it with 를, and then we're gonna use 부르다. 당장 지수를 불러. So 지수, who is being summoned, you can mark it with the object marking particle. 당장 지수를 불러. And moving on to the second group, the verbs that are followed by 이가 when it seems like it has to be 을을, but it's actually not. It's actually used with 이가. So one of those examples are 되다 verb, which means to become. And when you say a subject becomes a noun, become is not a verb that directly affects a noun. Instead, it's more of a verb that indicates the change of status of the subject. So subject becomes this. So I wouldn't say become is a verb that can be done onto a target, right? So when you say subject becomes something, you mark subject with subject marker and noun with 이가 subject marker. So if you want to say, I want to become a teacher, or let's try a more easier one, I will become the best, for example. If you want to say, I will become the best, you can mark it with subject marker. 저는 become the best. The best is 최고. Since this is what you will become, you can mark it with 이 or 가. Since 최고 does not end in 받침, you can mark it with 가. 저는 최고가 될 거예요. I will become. You can use it like this. Become is not a verb that can have an object because it's not something that can be done onto a target. It just indicates the change of the status of the subject. So you can say 저는 최고가 될 거예요, not 최고를 될 거예요. If it doesn't make sense, then just memorizing that 되다 verb cannot be used with 을을 should also work. And how about to have a noun? To have a noun, we say something 이가 있다. Actually, to go more deeper into this verb 있다, it means for something to be there. Like something is there. Something like exists there. So that something is always a subject because something is there, right? So 있다's first primary meaning is for something to be there, and thereby it can extend to mean to have. But essentially, this verb means for something to be there, so that something always has to be marked with a subject marker, not 을. So if you want to say, I have a younger sibling, you can say 저는 동생 means a younger sibling. 동생 동생이 있어요. I have a younger sibling. Literally, as for me, there is a 동생. There's a younger sibling. So it extends to I have a younger sibling. You cannot say 동생을 있어요. However, when you're using these verbs like 가지다, 갖다, which also means to have or to possess, or it can also mean like to take some time, to take a certain time, to make a certain time, you can mark it with 을. You can have a direct object, but not for 있다 verb. And same applies to the antonym of 있다, 없다. 없다 means to not have, and the same grammar rule applies. When you want to indicate you don't have something, that something has to be marked with 이가 when it's followed by 없다. And same with 좋다 and 싫다, which means to like and to dislike. You have to mark the noun, what you like or don't like, with 이가. So noun 이가 좋다, you like something. Noun 이가 싫다, you dislike something. And note that 좋다 is different from 좋아하다. 싫다 is different from 싫어하다. So I actually have a separate lesson where I explain the difference between 좋다 and 좋아하다, 싫다 and 싫어하다. You can find it in the part above here. But basically, 좋아하다 can have an object in a sentence, unlike 좋다 and 싫다. And also when we say to need something, we say noun 이가 필요하다, not 을을 필요하다. And there's actually a sensible reason for this, because 필요하다, the exact translation of this verb would be to be needed, not to need. So when something is needed, that something is always a subject, right? Something is needed. That's a subject. That's why 이가 is used. So 필요하다 is a descriptive verb that means to be needed. So if you want to say I need a break, like I need a rest, you can say 휴식, which means rest. 휴식이 필요해요. I need rest. I need rest. Not 휴식을 필요해요, right? And speaking of to be needed, so this verb is different from to need, in that to be needed is a passive form. So for the passive form of verbs, it's always followed by 이가 instead of 을. So for example, 취소하다 means to cancel. 취소되다 means to be cancelled. And if you cancel something, that something is an object, right? So you can say 주문을 취소했어요. I cancelled the order. 주문 means order. I canceled the order. So that order is an object of what you canceled. So you can mark it with 을. But if you want to say the order is canceled, the order is canceled, that order is the start of the sentence, which is the subject, right? Subject. So you can say 주문이 취소됐어요. To be cancelled. 주문이 취소됐어요. 주문이, not 주문을, right? So these passive verbs are also called descriptive verb, because you describe the state of the subject, right? So descriptive verb, like we learned, does not require any object, so it makes sense why passive verbs cannot have object marker. So here are the list of passive verbs that I brought. But I think it would be better to go over this when we actually get to learn about passive verbs specifically. So I'll just leave it here, guys. And the last verb that I want to mention is to be good at. To be good at. So in English, when you say to be, you are good at something, this is a descriptive verb, right? However, when we translate to be good at something in Korean, we say we do something well. We do something well. And when we do something, that something is always an object, right? Something that's done. So when we say we're good at something, we say something을 잘하다. 잘하다. We mark it with 을 particle instead of some other particles. So for example, if you want to say I am good at Korean, like I speak it fluently, you can say 저는 한국어 means Korean, and then you can mark it with 를. 저는 한국어를 잘해요. Or if you want to say I'm good at cooking, you can say 저는 요리를 잘해요. 요리 means cooking. And the antonym would be 못하다. 못하다 literally means can't do. So it means you can't do something, as in you're not good at something. Okay guys, so here is the one last grammar point that we are going to learn about the object marking particles, which is when the object is marked with 는 instead of 을을, it's not because that sentence is grammatically wrong, but it's to add nuance that can be added only with 는 topic marking particle. So let's look at the dialogues, two dialogues that I brought. So when you say 은지 likes all vegetables, right? If you want to translate this, you can say 은지 씨는. So this is the object in a sentence, right? All vegetables. 모든 야채를 or 모든 채소를, 채소, 야채, they all mean vegetables. 모든 채소를 다 to like, 좋아하죠. Again, if you don't understand the rest of the sentences, it's okay. We're focused on the object in this lesson, like I mentioned earlier. And B can answer, she doesn't like onions, but other than that, she likes them all. So in this sentence, guys, she doesn't like onion. Onion is an object in this sentence, right? But instead of saying 양파를, 은지 씨는 양파를 안 좋아하는데, instead of using 를, you can say 양파는 안 좋아하는데, 그거 빼고, other than that, 그거 빼고 다 좋아해요. So we remove this object then because it's obvious that she means vegetables. So you can just write the verb alone. 그거 빼고 다 좋아해요. But why did I not use 를 for 양파 when it's an object in a sentence? And just like we learned in subject marking particle class, 는 can be used to put emphasis on the noun, to make the noun a topic of that sentence. So it can mean, as for onions, she doesn't like, but other than that, except for that, she likes them all. So you will see many such instances where object, noun that's supposed to be an object in a sentence, is marked with 는 instead of 을을, and it's to add a certain nuance, whether it's emphasis, whether it's contrast, to add the nuance that only topic marker 는 can add. And let's look at the second, one last dialogue. I'm good at singing. So we learned that when we say to be good at something, we use something을 잘하다. So we consider what we're good at an object because 잘하다 literally means to do something well. And when you're doing something, that something is something that's done, so it's an object, right? So using this verb, we're gonna translate I'm good at singing. You can say 저는 for me, 저는 노래 means singing, or it could also mean a song. 노래를 잘해요. 저는 노래를 잘해요. I'm good at singing. And B, your friend can answer, good for you. 아, 좋겠네요. 좋겠네요. Good for you. I envy you. That's good for you. 좋겠네요. The next sentence, I'm not good at singing, but I'm good at dancing. So technically, grammatically, singing should be an object in a sentence. Dancing also has to be an object. But let me translate it in a more natural way. So you can say, 저는 노래 we learn it means singing. 노래는, and to be not good at something we learn it's 못하다, right? Antonym of 잘하다. 못하는데, 저는 노래는 못하는데, and I'm good at dancing. Oh, so one more thing to mention. To dance is 춤을 추다. And for some nouns, like 춤, you have to follow its corresponding verb when you say you are good at something. So we wouldn't say 춤을 잘하다 to mean to be good at dancing, but rather we would say 춤을 잘 추다. We use the corresponding verb. And there are many more verbs like this, and we are going to continue to learn those verbs. So 춤을 잘 추다, using 춤을 잘 추다, you can say 춤은 잘 춰요. 춤은 잘 춰요. But I'm good at dancing. So singing and dancing, which is supposed to be an object in a sentence, are marked with the topping marker, right? And the reason is, just like we learned in the advanced lesson for subject marking particle, 은는 also has a function of marking the nouns that are in contrast. So you use 은는 to mark each noun to maybe like compare these two. So if you say 저는 노래는 못하는데, this is something that you're not good at. But 춤은, dancing, is something that you're good at. They definitely show contrast. So in order to compare these two different qualities, you can mark the noun with 은. Okay, so that's everything that I brought for today's lesson. And 수고했어요, 여러분. You did a good job. You worked hard following this class. And I will see you in the next lesson. 다음 수업에서 봐요. 저랑 같이 한국어 공부해 주셔서 감사합니다. Thank you for studying Korean with me. Bye bye.